Hey guys, this week's sponsor is Cup of Tea. Cup of Tea is a premier online retailer of loose leaf organic teas and teaware. Based in Ontario, Canada, they are dedicated to enriching lives through the experience of premium teas specially made from organic ingredients, with each taste offering unique benefits to tea lovers all over the world and every drop telling a story. Their journey as a company began in 2008 when founder Taylor Lindsay Noel, an aspiring Olympic gymnast, suffered a devastating accident while training that left her paralyzed and in a wheelchair. Driven to overcome her challenges and transform her situation, she launched Cup of Tea in 2018 with the goal of providing the world's finest loose-leaf organic teas and teaware. Some of my favorite products include their cold brewer, which is this big-ass wine bottle-looking infuser, which you just drop some tea leaves in, put it in your fridge overnight with water, and in the morning you have cold tea, and it's delicious. I like to do a bit of chai and make a little chai latte for myself. They also have a lot of really great fruity teas. There's a mandarin one, a peach one, a berry one, and I've been experimenting with a couple tea cocktails myself. They are delicious. So thank you so much to Cup of Tea for sponsoring this week's episode, and make sure to check out their website today at www.cupoftea.com and use our code KNOCKING20, that's KNOCKING 20, for 20% off your entire order. And once again, that's www.cupoftea.com, and please tell them that we sent you.
This podcast contains explicit content and is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Don't say we didn't warn you. Well, hello again, friends.
My name is Madison.
And I'm Hannah.
And you're listening to Who's Knocking?
A true crime podcast. So for today's episode, I'm going to tell you, Madison, a story about a cult.
Yes.
Are you ready?
I'm actually kind of terrified about this because I've heard little bits and bobs, but I've purposely not been researching at all into this so that the shock will all come out here.
I kind of teased you with this one. I told you it really creeped me out when I was reading about it. I actually had second thoughts at one point of do I even want to do this? Do I even want to include these details? Because they get so fucked up.
Yeah.
But it's not going to start out that bad. We're going to do this in two parts. And the first part is actually somehow a lot lighter than the second part. So we can kind of ease into it.
Okay.
But so part of the reason I picked this story is because this cult actually took place, at least part of the story took place really nearby us, which is in the Kawartha Lakes area of Ontario.
Okay. Definitely I've cottaged up there before.
Yeah, okay, you've been there, so maybe you've been to the site of this. I don't know. It's kind of near where I live too, so I thought that was interesting. But it started in Quebec, which is a different province or state if you're not from Canada.
Yeah. So do you have a scale where you would rate it?
Do you want to get into that right now before we get into it at all?
Yeah. Well, because you have to tell me what your thoughts are so that I can then see if I agree.
Yeah, you can base it on what I'm saying. So, okay, let me give you a little tiny bit of an introduction before I get into the scale, because I had a few kind of context points as to why I picked where it is on the scale.
Okay.
So let me just say the events of the story take place between basically 1977 to 1989. And in the first part today, we're going to cover the events until about 1982.
Okay.
So I guess I'll introduce just a little bit the gentleman in question, the cult leader, who is named...
The star of the show.
Yeah. Really special guy. His name is Roch Theriault. That's the pronunciation that I'm going to go with. I hope I'm doing it right. He's an interesting guy. I mean, he's definitely delusional, as a lot of cult leaders tend to be.
Checks out.
Yeah. On the sadistic side, I would say.
Fun.
Yeah. Also, typically as a cult leader would be, he's been described as really charismatic, and he was able to convince a group of followers to accept really vicious and continuous abuse in the name of salvation and being basically a prophet of God. So
is it a Christian based?
Seventh-day Adventist based,
Okay.
which is, I believe, Christian.
I think
Christian adjacent, probably, originally, but he did deviate from that. Obviously, shout out Seventh-day Adventist. I know none of you guys would agree to anything that he did. But yeah, as I said, we're going to do 2 parts. Part 1 is honestly just the tip of the iceberg. Like, when I split these 2 parts up and I went back and looked at part 1, I realized it didn't have as much gruesome detail as the later part does. And I know I teased it to you, telling you, like, this is really, really fucked up. After this episode, you might not think it's that bad, but we'll see. But for this part, I pretty much wanted to set the stage, introduce our guy, Roch, and talk to you a little bit about his childhood, his adolescence, his upbringing, and kind of like the development of the cult, as well as some of the events of the actual cult that they take a turn for sure. But okay, so this is where it's interesting to me, because when I was thinking about where to rank it, I was really torn, because in the end, he ends up being charged with 1 murder officially at the conclusion of all of the events of this. So when I compare it to something like the Manson family, or obviously like the Jonestown massacre, those were a much bigger scale of murders.
Right.
A lot more casualties on top of the abuse that was happening to the people involved. So this was on a smaller scale, and at most the cult only had like 40 members, which most of them were kids. So it was like 12 adults, I believe. But there was some really, really horrific torture going on for years of the cult members. And it gets described in detail in a lot of the articles I read, which really paints an extremely vivid picture of some of the things that Roch did and told his cult members to do. And so in my head, I'm like, all right, there weren't really that many casualties necessarily. Like, a couple people did die, but for the most part, everyone survived these events. So like, it makes me think, like, where does Roch fit in among somebody like a Jeffrey Dahmer or John Wayne Gacy, who tortured people, briefly for maybe a day or whatever, and then killed them, and then did fucked up things with their dead bodies? Where does that fit in? Because he tortured people for years, and not as many of them died.
Well, that's why, like, this whole idea of doing a scale, like, it is really,
it's like individualistic.
Yeah, and it's really simplifying a very complex thing.
True.
So I don't, I'm not trying to like hold us to it or anything. I think it's just interesting. I'm interested to see different people's perspectives, and like, I think the interesting thing is like why you rate it as such.
Yes.
And I think a lot of it comes from like, by the end of the story, like, how does it like innately make you feel?
Yeah.
Like, that's the whole thing with the episode I did on Stephen Williams. Like, it wasn't like it was fucked, but it wasn't like so crazy, but something about that story just always stuck with me, and I've listened to like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds,
we know,
sadly, hundreds of stories and stuff about this. So it's just like, how does it make you feel?
I think that's it with me too. Like, there were certain aspects of this, just the way that he was essentially like holding people hostage in his cult. I don't want to give too much away, but the like guaranteed the psychological implications of everything they went through, as well as the physical complications for the people that made it, it's going to affect them for the rest of their lives for sure. So it's like,
it sounds like there are children involved, and I just think
definitely,
anytime children are involved, it's like, oh my god,
that's
like,
what
just takes it so much further with me.
That's what kind of takes it to the next level for me as well. So overall, I ended up ranking it as an 8.
Damn,
I know,
so much higher than the last one.
Oh, it is much, yeah.
Which I'm
for
like,
sure
thrilled for.
For sure. But I was trying to compare it to other cases. So obviously, like I said, Jonestown, Manson family, John Wayne Gacy, like, we're probably putting those at like a 10. So
yeah, I'd say those are up in a 10. I can't think of any, but like people who murder multiple children, who they do that, like people who do like incest and
like, that's up there, right?
And so, like sexually abused children, like to me those are like the 9s and 10s, like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Okay, so then maybe I can put it at a 9. I wasn't sure because I didn't want to.
Oh my god, if there's like sorry, I just kicked something. If there's like children being sexually abused, like,
yeah,
oh my
there
god.
is. Okay, so then
so warning, children being sexually abused. If you're not interested in listening to something like that, don't listen.
This
okay?
is like a trigger warning episode. Like, I was pretty shocked reading a lot of it. Yeah, like I was gonna put it at an 8 because I didn't want to overrate it. Because it's hard to...
just rate it where you think.
Yeah, so like 8 or 9.
Honestly, like, it doesn't matter. We're just literally making this up.
That's true. Nobody's holding us to this, which,
Well, and please don't.
We would love to hear feedback on what other people think, for sure, and why, because it's just an interesting discussion, I think. But really, it's like the degree of details that I was able to find, the really specific details of abuse, because some cases you can hear like, okay, someone was being abused, like some things were happening, but you don't necessarily get the details. And it's the detailed accounts of like so many accounts, one after the other, where you're just like, I need to go hug my dog. Like, I was like, this is a lot. So
strap in, guys.
Yeah, so make sure you have like a kitten with you for this episode. But okay, so for the first part, I thought maybe a 4 or 5 only, because like there's
just
definitely...
for the recounting of the first part.
Yeah, just the first part, because the really fucked up aspects come in the second part, I find. Like, you'll see the way I split it up, it's kind of like chronologically, and at a certain point, like there is a kind of a natural point where it's like the first phase to the second phase of the cult, and that's where I split it up. And the second phase becomes a lot more, at least, okay, actually the first phase, like, I think a lot of stuff was going down, but not to the extent, and I just found more detail in the later side of it.
Okay.
So I said for the first part, maybe a 4 or 5, because the fear aspect, like the psychological torture aspect, to me is like...
Oh, that's terrifying.
That's scary. Like, to me, it's almost scarier than like, you're murdered and it's done. Because then you're scared for like, however long that's happening, and then hopefully...
You live with that for the rest of your life, possibly.
Well, yeah, with the, if you become murdered or like whatever, probably you're in a better place now, hopefully. But if you're tortured and then freed, it's like... psychologically, you're still living that torture until you can overcome it. So the torture, the fear aspect, I put it up at a 4 or 5. And then there is a death. I won't spoil or say yet. So there is a death in the first part that happens, but it's not the murder that he ultimately got convicted for. That's going to come in part 2.
Okay.
So 8 or 9, honestly maybe 9. Now I'm talking myself back into it. I'm like 10. It was fucked.
Well, maybe it is a 10. There's no limit to the amount
maybe
of 10s
it is. Okay, I'm interested to hear what you think at the end of this.
I'm so excited.
Okay, let me tell you about our boy Roch. This very special man. So he was born May 16th, 1947. He's from a French-Canadian Catholic family in Quebec, Canada. So I didn't find a ton of information on his upbringing. A lot of what I found were claims that he made about his childhood, which...
questionable, obviously.
Questionable. One of the claims he made was that he apparently played with wild bears as a child, which would be cool if it was true.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of cool.
We always need to question the source.
Yeah.
Of course.
It's outlandish, but that would be cool if it was true.
Did he say what type of bears?
Wild bears.
So, like, black bears, brown bears, grizzly bears, polar bears?
Maybe. Probably not polar bears. The rest of them,
well,
though?
What kind of... He's in Quebec, so
Quebec, yeah.
whatever
the local bear population
I don't know what
was.
bears are in Quebec. Probably black bears.
There's definitely bears there. Like, he was from a small town and stuff. So I'm like, okay.
But it's like,
maybe.
It's one thing to be playing with, like, a black bear that's, like, essentially a raccoon that's bigger. Or it's another to be playing with a grizzly bear, which could just fuck your day and destroy you. Did you ever watch Grizzly Man?
Yes.
Oh, like those were grizzly bears.
Yeah.
And remember, he just got ripped to shreds.
I just remember the part where he was like admiring their poop.
Well, no,
the only part I remember.
At the end, him and his girlfriend just got ripped to shreds, and like there's the audio of it, and like that's the grizzly bear. Black bears don't do that. Okay, black bears just eat your garbage.
We're thinking black bears. Now I just want to like talk more about black bears.
Let's go back on that. Slightly less impressive. Anyway, go on.
Let's go back on track. So he was the second of 7 children. And the school in his small town only went up to the 7th grade, which he completed. None of the kids in the family did schooling further than that, but it was said that he was an intelligent child. One interesting thing about his childhood I found kind of interesting was that his family was really, really strictly religious. Mm-hmm. And his dad was a member of this really devout Catholic organization that was known as the White Berets. So really religious family. It sounds like the dad forced the family into a lot of church time and door-to-door campaigning, which I feel like probably not ideal for a child.
No, I wouldn't like it.
Yeah, I don't think I'd enjoy that, and neither did Roch, so he ended up hating the Catholic religion, essentially, and overall was really disdainful of organized religion as an adolescent, kind of like rebellious mindset.
It's like a sweet atheist rebeller type.
Kind of. He does get back into religion, but it sounded like he specifically hated like Catholicism, like the religion that his dad forced him into, basically. But he was kind of like, you know.
Right. Catholicism is like one of the more stricter versions.
Sounds really strict. And so, okay, I really want to like when I was diving into this, I really wanted to find out something that's like what made him into this sadistic person. But apparently his childhood and adolescence wasn't that eventful from what I found. I did find that he claimed his father to be abusive, which his dad denied, but, you know, who knows? I also read reports that as a teenager, he was really charming, really charismatic, and he really enjoyed attention. And he enjoyed performing and showmanship. So I feel like seeds of a cult leader were there. So I don't know. Maybe... because I really want to find a reason.
There's no, like, specific instance.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing. If his dad was abusive, like, what was the abuse?
Right.
Because, like, that's a...
It's a broad
we don't know,
thing.
But, like, if he was, like, raping him or something, like, there you go. But if he was, like...
just kind of a dick. Force them to go to church all the time. Yeah, so it's hard to say. And I know we've discussed this before, like, the whole nature-nurture debate. But I feel like it's a really interesting piece of the puzzle for me. And it always like ties the story together for me when I hear like the upbringing of a lot of these people. But
any head injuries?
Yeah, I don't know, maybe none that were reported, but that would explain a lot, to be honest.
It seems to be a common thread in a lot of like serial killers and things like that, which we were discussing recently, actually. I
know, so that could be it. Honestly, I thought, okay, maybe the influence of the strict religion in his childhood. Or maybe he was just born a creep.
Well, it's interesting, too, because some people take, like, a much... like, a smaller incident and just make it into a really big thing because they are a dramatic person.
Yeah, true. He definitely is a dramatic person. That's a one word for it. That's one way to describe him. I mean, you know. Okay, so in 1967, when he was 20 years old, he got married to a lady named Francine Grenier, and they had two sons, Roch Jr. and Francois. So around this time, I found a few significant events that I found noteworthy. I feel like these all played a role in what goes down later within the cult, so I wanted to list them. So number one, he developed several ulcers, which is basically, I looked into what an ulcer is. It's basically a sore on the lining of your stomach, small intestines, or esophagus. It sounds extremely painful.
Oh, yeah?
It sounds really, really unpleasant. And so he actually required surgeries to fix them, and then developed some health complications from the surgeries. And then because he was in pain and had digestive issues on an ongoing basis, he became very easily irritated and temperamental as a result.
It made him cranky.
Yeah. Which, I mean...
fair enough. No.
You know.
Girl, I'm a cranky person
I complain.
when I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah. I like to complain, so okay, I get it. And this is going to come into play later. He developed an interest in medicine and anatomy, and he taught himself a lot about those subjects. An aspiring medicine man, I'd say.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, that's going to tie back in later on. Another thing is that he got into local politics at this time. So I kind of feel like his attention craving kind of...
cult leaders and politicians, I think, have a lot of overlap.
Yes. I got that vibe too. Okay, so that. Another thing, he got really interested in sex and sexuality, despite being married, which I will discuss more in just a minute. But again, you know, these cult people, they always have their views on sexuality that are very radical, so that definitely is at play here.
They love that. Yeah.
It's a big part of it later. And then last thing to note, he became a very heavy drinker. So if you want somebody to be really rational and just make good decisions, probably not.
Go easy on that.
Yeah, probably not going to help with the heavy drinking. But okay, like I said, he had become interested in sexuality, which from what I read basically meant that he was sleeping with a lot of other women. And his wife left him. So
fair trade.
Yeah. So the next interesting thing that I wrote down was around the time his wife got the fuck out of there, he discovered the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And that's really where I feel like the future cult leader that he became started to take shape after he got involved with that church.
Do we know, like, what drew him to that?
I believe that he just, like, was able to fall in with a local sect of it. Mm-hmm. And there was a local sect that he fell in with. They had these values of, like, really good nutrition and just, like, moral upstanding, and he was accepted among them. So it was kind of like a group that accepted him at the time.
More than, like, the actual religion itself, maybe?
Yeah, I think it was more so about just being a part of the religion and, like, finding a place for himself where he could kind of rise in the ranks, which he does start to. But he was, like, the reason I say that is because from what I read, he was a really performative follower of it. Like, he was really boastful of how much he was a follower of it. He had quit drinking at the time. He was following their lifestyle, which includes healthy eating and nutrition. But apparently he was pissing off the other Adventists with how showman-like he was about the religion and how boastful he was about, like, how moral he is and how, like, how great he is following this religion. So,
right, it's not very humble.
Yeah, so the other Adventists weren't really loving him. They weren't necessarily accepting him in the sense that, like, they believed that he believed in it. But around this time, he became interested in the Bible, specifically the Old Testament. Here are a couple of the themes that interested him in the Old Testament.
I bet they're good ones.
Yeah, they're great, just great. So, masculine authority, number one. Subservience of woman.
Love it.
So, yeah, I mean, great.
Bow down.
Yep. And then the other one was the apocalypse. Really interested in the apocalypse.
Classic cult.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, the apocalypse idea being that humans are going to face violent penalties for their sins, but the righteous will be separated and saved while the sinners are destroyed.
So do what I say or you're going to die in a fiery bout of hell.
Assuming, yes, that he is the righteous one.
Well, I feel like that seems like where it might be leading.
Yeah, of course. So, I think you can see from these things, like, as a later cult leader, these are some of the concepts that he would exploit down the line. But this is actually the point where the cult started to form, because while he was working for the Adventists, he was doing door-to-door campaigns and he was running workshops on quitting smoking, which was, like, one of the ways they got people into the church. And doing these workshops and these door-to-door campaigns, he started to, like, rise up in the ranks and build his preaching skills, for lack of a better term.
So when he was doing door-to-door campaigns, was that for political reasons or was that a church thing?
It was for the church thing.
Okay.
Like, he had been involved in local politics. I didn't find a ton about it. It seems like once he got into the church, that kind of became his, like, main thing.
Right, okay.
So by 1977, from what I read, he had about 10 devoted followers on his side, just from his own campaigning. So even though they were members of the church, they were kind of like a subdivision already, where they were more like following him.
Interesting. But still within the church, like, how, because I feel like, would other people in the church not be like, hey, that's kind of weird, guys, like...
Yeah, they were pissed later. But at this point, it was pretty low-key. They were all still, like, normally living within the church. Like,
just like a little side thing.
Yeah, it was just kind of like... It was really low-key at this point. Like, he hadn't done anything at all sketchy at this point. They were just, like, really drawn in with his charisma. Was he just, like, teaching them
extra stuff or, like, doing, like, Bible study classes or...
He was running workshops and stuff, but it was mostly just because he was super charismatic and he was just charming people to be on his side. Yeah. Like, he was just getting them on his side, basically. And it was kind of like I guess it was like a little crew. He had a girlfriend at the time who's known as Giselle in the story. I don't know if that's her real name, but that's the name I found for her. And a lot of the followers would all just, like, hang out and sleep at her apartment. So it was kind of like that, where it was like a social kind of aspect as well. But these people became the cult. So based on the articles I read, it was all written as, like, these were his followers at that time.
But at that time, it's probably like, oh, these are just, like, friends who hang out.
Yeah. At that time, he was part of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He was, like, really showboating about how he was in it, but he was rising up in it. He was doing his workshops, all that stuff. So, okay, let's get into the development of the cult itself, which Roch later nicknamed the Anthill Kids. And that's because while they were building their commune and he was relaxing and doing fuck all,
of course,
he thought they looked like ants working on an anthill. So he named them the Anthill Kids.
Oh.
Yes.
That's cute.
Yeah. I mean, all that time sitting around, you know, he had some time to think of some names. So while they're breaking their backs, building a commune. Okay, so as I alluded, he had convinced some of these followers, or his followers, to leave their jobs, or some of them were in college, so he'd convinced them to leave college, leave their families, and move with him to this little area in the wilderness near Ste. Marie, Quebec, which is where they built their first commune.
Okay.
So in this location, they opened what they called a healthy living clinic, where they sold organic food and holistic health books and pamphlets. So this was making them money. It was attracting more followers, and it was also giving Roch a reputation as a healer who could cure people of their ailments.
Ugh.
You know, he's a medicine man, aspiring.
It's all just like following such a clear path.
I know. It's just like textbook. Like,
Yeah.
of course. So here's another one. At this point, he started making all his followers wear a uniform, which could, just to cultify it even further.
Shout out to Heaven's Gate Away team.
Yeah.
Patches.
Oh, not on that level. It's not on that level. We tried to find those patches online.
And the sneakers.
The sneakers, yeah. Does Nike still sell those?
Was it Nike shoes?
It was Nike, I'm pretty sure. We just show up next episode wearing like navy blue tracksuits, patch, Nike sneakers, $5.25 in the pocket. 'Cause that's how much it costs to get to the spaceship. Yeah, it wasn't on that level. See, that's when like I hear things like that or compare it. It's like, where does this fit in? But okay, so he had the cult vibes: green tunic for the women, beige for the men, dark brown robe for himself.
Okay. Not super exciting, but
yeah,
all right.
Fashion wasn't his strong suit. Okay, so at this time, actually, this is kind of interesting. In the social dynamic of the group, all the women started competing for his attention, even though like some of them were married, there was other men in the group. But it made his main girl, Giselle, feel worried about her place like with him. So she decided to propose to him to make sure she could be his number one.
Interesting.
Yeah. So he did marry her.
So he said yes.
Yeah, he did say yes.
Oh, cute.
But, okay, so he married her on January 8th. Spoiler alert, not a happy marriage.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I don't know, like, if that's a surprise, but... Okay, so he married her January 8th, 1978, but she realized that he probably just married her to look good for the Adventist church, that he was a married man and for the appearances. And he continued to flirt with all the other women in the group. So she was pretty unhappy, but she stayed.
I'm going to go ahead and take a wild guess and guess that he cheats on her later, too.
Yes. How'd you know? How'd you guess that?
Just a wild guess.
Yeah, so... Oh, he certainly does. So at this time, some of the members of the Adventist church started trying to convince, especially the women, the young women, to leave Roch and go back to their families. So they're living at this new commune. And members of the Adventist church are trying to get some of the girls to go back home. They were all in their early to mid 20s. So some of them were like 18, 19. Some of them were like the oldest, I think, like 24. So they were pretty young. And Roch himself was around 30 at the time. So basically the church is kind of stepping in, trying to say like, I don't know if this guy's all that.
Yeah, and probably being like, guys, you're gonna die.
Yeah, like, well, what are you doing with this guy? He's bad news.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually at this time, the police had become involved because some of the girls' families had asked them to help, and they were investigating Roch, but everyone had refused to leave him, and actually they refused to even speak to the police at all, and he was the only one who spoke to the police. So the police couldn't find anything like sketchy going on, and they couldn't really do anything.
And they're all like over 18, so they can't really do much, right?
True, yeah. So basically at this point, he already had all the cult followers completely in his pocket at that time. They were really committed to staying with him despite the fact that their families, their church, the police were suggesting that they leave. So here's an interesting thing that happened at this time. Notable medical endeavor, you could say. Speaking of his, medical enthusiasm. So he convinced a new member of his cult, a gentleman, whose wife was fighting leukemia at the time, to discharge her from the hospital. Roch claimed he could cure her.
Of course he did.
Yes, so she was on a lot of drugs, she was on a lot of medication, she was struggling with her fight against leukemia. And Roch said, I can cure her. I can fix her. She doesn't need a hospital.
Ah, Roch.
Yeah. he's a medical expert, so he actually forbid everyone to see her while he worked with her. So that's, isolation is always a good way to.
He isolated the poor leukemia patient.
Yeah.
Oh
Want to hear what his cure was? It's not that exciting, but organic grape juice and healthy food was his cure.
Oh.
Yeah.
And did she live?
No, she died. Not funny.
That's
Rest in peace.
terrible,
but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
No fucking shit. She died. However, he did tell his followers that God told him it was her time to go. And when God
fair
says
enough.
God says it's your time to go, it's your time to go.
True.
So it wasn't his fault. So yeah. There was one or two more little stories like that, but this one was the main kind of like detailed one.
Oh.
But he was kind of convincing people that he was like a medicine man. All right, so in April of 1978, he was officially kicked out of the Adventist church.
Great.
They were fed up with him. And his...
Good move, Adventist church.
Yeah, good call, guys. They made the right call on that one. So, but he didn't really seem to care, to be honest. At that point, he already had his loyal band of followers that were all, like, sticking with him despite the police trying to separate them and the church trying to separate them. So he didn't really care to be kicked out.
He didn't need those Adventists.
No. He had his own thing going at that point. So here's a fun fact.
Okay.
At that point, he started randomly pairing and marrying his followers together, whether or not they wanted to be married to each other.
There it is.
Yeah, and despite the fact that he didn't have credentials to marry people, he's just started doing that. Here's something creepy. So some of the families of the women came to their weddings, and one of the women, Solange, who becomes a part of the story later, the family at her wedding said that they got really uncomfortable with the ramblings, the drunken speeches that he was making at the ceremony, talking about how the women should be servants of the men.
Oh, that's what you want to hear at your daughter's wedding?
Yeah, so they were really creeped out, but they didn't really want to say anything to her because they were already scared to lose her even more since she had pretty much like left them to move in with Roch and his cult. So they didn't really want to say anything. They didn't want her to push her further away, so... But they were just really uncomfortable.
As I would be as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's a red flag. That's like,
well,
oh,
it's
God.
very like, that's the like matchmaking of other people. Like, it's very on brand for a lot of cults. Like Waco, where like he would let them be with each other, but he's like, oh, but the women can only have sex with me. Like, only I will have the children here. And like, it's not the same, but it's like
it does
comes from a similar place.
It does shift in that direction here later too. Yes, this is like the first iteration. So okay, getting back to Roch's wife Giselle, remember she married him because she wanted to be his main girl. So she was pregnant at this time, 1978, and she was feeling really rejected by him because he was hitting on all the other girls. So she decided, as all healthy relationships do, she decided to give him an ultimatum.
Mm-hmm.
Either he disband the commune, send everyone back home to their families, or she would leave him and move back home with her own family.
So stay with your wife or end your cult that you were a leader of, and get rid of everybody who is essentially your slave.
Yes. Do you think this ended well for her?
No. Oh, poor Giselle.
No. So Roch's response was to punch her in the mouth and not let her leave her room for 2 days.
Oh my God.
Yeah. He was basically like, fuck you.
Jesus.
I'm God here.
Okay.
Don't give me an ultimatum. But also you're not leaving.
Just punched her in the face?
Yeah. The article I read said he smashed her in the mouth. Whatever that means.
Oh, even that sounds worse.
It sounds worse, yeah. I didn't want to plagiarize. So I was like, he punched her. So yeah, that happened.
Roch.
Actually, the first description of violence that I found in this whole situation, 1978, but...
was the smash to the face.
Yeah. So that happened.
Okay.
Yeah. So at this point, his cult was all committed to him. They lived in their commune in Saint-Marie, Quebec, and he was presenting himself as this healer and religious man. Although he'd been kicked out of the Adventist church, he was still kind of masquerading as this, like, moral, religious guy. But nothing too crazy yet, as I was able to find in my research anyway. Kind of mostly above board.
Okay.
So they moved from their first commune in June 1978, and it was in April that he'd been kicked out of the church. But they moved in June because without the monetary support of the Adventist church, their health clinic had a ton of debts that they couldn't pay off. And also, ever since the women who had leukemia that Roch claimed that he was going to cure. Ever since she had died, the police were really monitoring them, and they were kind of all over them.
What monetary help was the church giving them?
I don't know. They were funding them, though.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, they were, I mean, they were helping pay for, I don't know, the supplies, I guess, at that health clinic.
He would have had to say, like, my cult, which he wouldn't have called it. He would have had to say, like, we are just another...
Like a section of the Adventists, yeah.
Like,
they were masquerading as Adventists at that time. So they were allegedly part of the church. Like, that's where he found his followers. Either people that he, like, convinced to join the church or people who already were in it. So they were kind of, like, under the label of the Seventh-day Adventist.
Okay, that makes sense.
Up until that point.
I understand now.
Yeah, so they had the support of the church. But once they lost that support, then they basically, like, didn't have enough money. And because the police were, like, you guys, like, what happened to this woman that had leukemia? And the police had been involved earlier, too, because some of the girls' families were asking them to help. Right. So
they're suspicious.
Yeah, they were suspicious. They were doing surveillance on them. So at that point, they decided to move from that first commune. They wandered around for a couple of months. And during this time, Roch actually claimed to have a vision of the future.
Of course.
Yeah, so as one does. In this vision, he saw that the world was going to end, actually, on February 17th, 1979.
And it was 78 at the time?
It was like summer of 78. And he said he had seen that there was going to be massive chunks of hail, earthquakes, and lightning. And the world was going to end.
Specific?
Yeah. So Roch said that they would be God's chosen, but only if they created a righteous lifestyle in the wilderness with Roch as their guide.
Oh.
Only way to salvation. So, I mean.
That makes sense.
You got to take it, right?
And everyone's like, yeah, okay, cool.
They're like, yeah, okay.
He said so.
I mean, why not? So they began to build a communal cabin in the Quebec wilderness. Of course, Roch couldn't actually help build it since he had stomach pains from his ulcers.
Oh.
Apparently, based on some reports, he claimed to have cancer.
But he probably cured it with, like, grape juice and stuff, right?
I know. That's why it was weird. I was like, why would you say you have cancer if you're claiming you could cure it? It's, like, convenient.
Just drink some grape juice.
I know. Come on, dude. Just eat some organic food. Like, it's going to cure it. But that's, like, his excuse for not doing any work, basically.
Ugh. It's like these, like, who's not catching this
I know. These poor, like, it was mostly women that were his followers. And I'm like, man, you girls deserve better.
Well, I guess that's, you'd like to think in these situations that you'd like be like, okay, he said he could cure cancer, and now he's claiming he has cancer. Yeah. Where's all the grape juice?
It doesn't add up.
But I guess, I'm sure that he specifically targeted, like, vulnerable girls and blah, 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 whatever. Exactly what they always do.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like, too, like, once they're so in it, once they've basically, like, renounced their families, and they're young women, too, like, they probably don't have a lot of other opportunities in life or other connections. It's kind of like, this is the family they know now, and he's this, like, charming guy. Like, I never met him personally, obviously, but all reports say that he's a super, super charming guy. Right. So...
Have you... Sidetrack, but have you seen any of the NXIVM documentaries?
I don't think I've seen the documentaries, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, because the two of them just got sentenced today, and I think he's in for life, or it's like a number of different counts.
They're similar, right? Like
and the one girl who was she was like an ex-actor, or she was an actor, I guess now she's an ex-actor, who was like really high up in like the sex kind of cult part of it. She got 3 years, which is like, she definitely was not expecting that.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's just the exact same environment,
Yeah. Like, once you're in that environment, it is really, really hard to leave it, because they exert psychological control over you. So even if they're not physically making you stay, like, in your head, you don't think you can escape.
It's very, like, domestic violence adjacent.
It is. It totally is. And the thing with that, too, is, like, I don't, like, at this point, I hadn't found that much of him threatening them, although that definitely comes into play later. He threatens them a fucking lot. But he had enough influence over them where, like, they all chose to stay with him, despite moving to the wilderness, leaving their families behind, all that stuff. So,
and I think there's also another aspect of it that's, is like a bit different than the domestic violence thing, wherein you're in a group and it's like when you see other people doing it, you're like, okay, well, they must, like, if they're doing it, then it must be okay.
Right.
And you kind of justify it in that sense.
I definitely think so. I think like the group aspect, because I mean, they were drawn to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, so they were looking to belong, right? Like they were looking for, they probably didn't feel like they belonged within their families and homes and all that. So I do think the group psychology aspect comes into play a lot with this one. I mean, some of the stuff later, like I know I keep like promoting it, but like what the hell? Some of the stuff later is crazy. So anyways, okay, so they're building the cabin, and he would just pretty much sit around and watch them and tell them about how everyone in the outside world is all evil. They're all trying to oppress their righteous mission, and those outsiders are going to be doomed for eternity.
Question. What does he look like?
A creep. You got to see some pictures of this guy.
I'm going to look up a picture. Like, I want to put a picture.
Okay, look up a picture. There's, most of the photos online of him seem to be around from the same time period.
Spell his last name.
Ther. That's the one, yeah. Thank God I didn't have to spell it out. Yeah, creepy, right?
Yeah, giant beard.
Yeah. His eyes are really scary.
Is that them?
I guess so. Yeah, that's him.
That's horrifying.
All the cult followers look dead behind the eyes. I've never actually seen that photo of them. That's the photo that I always see of him. Like, look at his eyes. There's no humanity in those eyes. I think that was when he, like, later when he was arrested.
He looks scary.
Yeah, like I would not want to run into him in a dark alleyway or like literally at any time.
Yep.
Okay. It's creepy, right?
Cool. Yep. Just wanted to put a face to a name.
That it tracks, right?
Yep.
Like that's what he would look like. But I haven't seen the group cult photo. That's an interesting picture.
Yeah. I'll save it.
Yeah, save it. We can post it on
For
Instagram.
later.
Okay, so they're building this cabin, and he's giving them these religious sermons and saying basically like, everyone in the outside world is evil, we're the righteous, you guys got to stay with me because you're going to be doomed otherwise. But a couple people did decide to leave, and he let them go, though.
Oh, I was just going to ask, like, did he just let them go?
Yeah, at this point he let them go, a couple of the people, and he let them go, but he basically told everyone who was left behind or that stayed was like, those people are fucking evil, and just like denounced them.
All right, well.
Yeah, so a few people dipped out at that point. That's what I'm saying. Like,
I feel like with a lot of cults, like, if you get out early, you can get out. But it's like once it gets past a certain point, then you're stuck.
That's the impression I get from this too, because some of the later stuff is like, it's next level, and at this point, it's like he's just letting people walk out.
And that also makes it seem like to everybody else that you can.
Yeah, that's true. It makes it seem more
trapped.
Voluntary at that point. Yeah. I mean, it was early days, right? This was 1978, and he had first started the group in 1977. So it was only a year in. So it's pretty early on. So they had built this communal cabin with one main room, but there was like little partitions for separate rooms.
Okay.
Not like full rooms, but just like little barriers. And at this point, Roch decided to rename himself Moses, the leader of the Exodus, from the depravity of the modern world.
That's his whole name?
No, that's the part I wrote.
Okay.
That he was the leader of the Exodus.
Okay.
I was just using some creativity to write that out. But no, he didn't call himself Moses. Okay. There was another like term of how he, like a different like variation of Moses, but I didn't know how to pronounce it, so Moses. That's essentially what it was. And so at that time too, he renamed all his followers because, why not? Cut off their identities. He renamed them names from the Old Testament as well. And at this point, they lived off of welfare checks, and they had a collective budget of 1,400 Canadian per month.
For how many people?
I believe it was around 12 people at this point, around 12 followers. Mostly women, a couple men. So not a huge group at the time. Here's where things start to take a little bit of a turn. So Roch's wife, Giselle, had found out that he actually had had sex with one of the other women. And she tried to run away.
Giselle tried to run away?
Yep, Giselle tried to run away. But Roch caught up with her and choked her out. So, couldn't run away.
Not to death, but just...
No, just like, I mean, I think what I had read was, I forget what it was, like, it didn't say strangled. It said something like he, like, grabbed her around the throat and, like, really scared her. And she was 6 months pregnant at the time as well, so just to add to it. So she was really scared. Like, the way that the words that the article used that I read had said she was cowed, like kind of like scared into submission.
Mm-hmm.
And she was scared for her life, so she decided to stay just because she was so scared of what he might do if she left.
Right. And she's also pregnant, so she's like extremely vulnerable.
Right, probably scared for her baby too.
Yeah.
But here's where things start to really get twisted. So Roch decided that all of the marriages that he created among his followers were no longer valid. And now,
here we go.
He was to be married to each of the women in the cult.
Oh!
So that happened.
True!
He then had to consummate all of the marriages and impregnate each of the women.
True. Okay.
You know? So
yeah. It only makes sense.
I mean, yeah. There you go.
So how did the men take this?
There was only a couple men, I think. There wasn't that many, but I mean, they were down with it. No complaints. I didn't, in the section that I read about that, there was nothing mentioned about anything that the men said at that point. So
there must have been like at least a couple because there were marriages.
Yeah, there was a couple men. Honestly, like some of the information I read kind of like bounced back and forth. Some of the information, like different names were involved. So some of the details seem to get a little bit fuzzy at sometimes.
I'm sure it's hard, like...
Yeah, because it's all accounts, right, from them. So, but nothing was... I did not read anything specific about the men protesting or anything like that.
Right.
I mean, he did say that, like, he had already been saying that women were supposed to be below men. So I assume that he was giving the men more status. He was kind of giving them some type of, like, incentive that made them still feel valuable within the cult.
Oops, yeah. So they just all had to like line up and get impregnated by him?
Yep.
Disgusting.
Yep.
That's so
I mean, you saw his photo. He's a creep.
Ugh.
But he's charming, so I don't know. Maybe that made it better.
He's so little head hair, but so much beard hair.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like very like alien.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll post a photo.
So
but
much forehead.
So much. So much, and such creepy staring eyes. It's just like, you never want to look into those eyes. Oh, okay. I like go to sleep at night and his face is there. Oh. Okay, here's kind of like side note, interesting note.
Mm-hmm.
Around this time, so they had moved to this new communal cabin around the summer of 1978. Mm-hmm. And in November of 1978, the Jonestown massacre had happened. And that received obviously a lot of attention in the media.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, the idea of doomsday cults became an international concern. So once again, some of the families of the cult members started to involve the police to investigate.
Right.
The cult
that
again.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But again, Roch convinced them that he was harmless. Like, this guy, he has a way, like, clearly he has a way to convince people. The police were just like, he's just, he's just living in the mountains.
A lot of the time, like, it's, like, do you want laws that prohibit this type of thing? Because, like, technically it's all... voluntary. These are all adults.
Yeah.
Like,
yep.
They're making what I would say are questionable decisions, but they are their own decisions.
Yeah. Nothing obviously wrong, I guess. Although, I mean, he abused the Giselle.
The punch to the face, not cool.
Yeah.
But how do you prove that?
And he didn't let anybody else speak to the police. Only he could. And I think there was at one point where, like, the police did question some of the others, but they were just like, no, everything's fine.
Yeah.
I think that happened multiple times.
It's like, that's your choice.
Yeah. But that's the thing is, like, that's what happens in abusive situations. It's like, you say everything's fine because, like, they don't know. What are the police going to do? What the fuck is Roch going to do to us if we agree with the police? Like, he's going to probably do something worse than what the police will do to him. So it's kind of like,
yeah,
you know
especially,
what I mean?
Yeah, I guess if he's not going to get in any trouble, he can always come back and find you. Ooh,
yeah, and just do way worse shit to them. So, anyways.
Ugh.
Yeah. But at this point, so he had convinced all of his followers that women had to be subservient to men, but overall, they all had to be below him, including the men. He was the top dog.
Moses.
Yeah, Moses. I found a letter written to him by one of his followers at the time. Would you like me to read it to you?
I would. Now, was this originally in French?
I read it in English, so I'm going to assume that, yeah, it probably was originally in French. Yeah. At this point, they were living in Quebec still.
That they were all French because they were...
They're francophones. Like, they were originally... But later, he becomes more anglicized. So later, he does become more English. But at this point, they probably were still pretty French.
Okay.
I mean, they're all from Quebec, still living there. So this letter can give you a little bit of an idea of the relationship of the cult members to him.
Okay.
So it says, "Hello, Pappy," which is what they called him.
Not Moses?
Yeah, I guess a little bit of both.
All right.
Because he was like the father and Giselle was like the mother, his main wife. So here's what the letter says. I am writing about what you said on the subject of nutrition. It is very true that I nibble, and a damnable fault which I will never again repeat. The thought of ingesting such a large quantity of food in so little time discourages me, even if I work outside the entire day without eating. I ask that you forgive me. If it is stealing, I did not realize it. It is this fault which causes my plumpness. I do not want to be a fat and plump servant. That is too ugly next to the man that you are. I don't know what to think about everything and the meaning of my actions. I only know that I will not repeat them, and I don't speak lightly. I wish to be a true servant to you, my master. Alert, vigorous, with a clear and lively spirit, and a well-balanced to serve you every moment of my life. I don't know, typo. I have a long way to go. Thank you, Pappy. I love you. Hogla is the name she was given. Francine was her name. So basically he called her fat for eating too much, and she had to write a letter, or decided to write a letter.
So
sorry, I'm so fucking fat.
That's what kind of reminds me of the NXIVM cult, because it basically it's very complicated, but like their leader was like an offshoot of them, where like he created this like weird, it was a sex cult, because they all ended up, I think they did end up having sex with him and stuff, but he created this like hierarchy chain where everybody who joined would be a slave to somebody else.
I mean, and some of that stuff happens.
Upon joining, they would have to give collateral of like nude photos or like secrets they didn't want getting out, so that they wouldn't leave.
Yeah, blackmail.
And they had to be like a slave to their master in like every aspect of their life. So like every time they wanted food, they had to like be like, "Can I eat this?"
That's
and
crazy.
The master would have to be like, "No, you can only eat like 6 calories or whatever." Like,
why do I not know that much about the NXIVM cult?
Oh, they're so fucked. It's crazy.
That is crazy, and it's a recent one too. So it's got like the digital age aspects into it.
And he branded them like on their crotches.
Yeah, well, this sounds familiar, but I feel like I just don't know that much about it.
It's been in the news a lot, and it's like, you know, in the new age.
All right, note to self:
new age cult.
Google this after.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the letter. And honestly, like, I didn't find that many details about torture and abuse at this time compared to the details that I found later. But it does seem like some of it was going on, because there was a few stories that I found from this time that are pretty revealing about how violent he was towards his cult members, and that they were already being subjected to some type of abuse. But there just wasn't that much detail about it, and it just, like, pales in comparison to what the shit he did later.
Well, this seems like a grooming psychological situation.
Like, slowly, I mean, this is what these people do. Like, they slowly rope you in. They start to test how much they can, like, how much abuse you'll tolerate, and then amp it up.
Yep.
But so he'd gone back to drinking after being sober for 2 years. Like, when he joined the church, he became sober, and now he went back to drinking. So that's always
fun.
Yeah, that's always going to lead to some kind-hearted, gentle behavior. So at this point, he began to deliver these drunk sermons that would just go on and on and on for hours, like rambling about, you know, his religious beliefs. However, everyone had to listen to it, and if anyone fell asleep, he would smack their head with a 4-inch thick club.
Oh.
Yeah. So, gotta stay awake. I mean, it seems like that would make you fall asleep, but...
Yeah, that would, like, knock you out.
It's like, stay awake. Doesn't really track, but okay.
Ugh.
So, another thing that I had read was there was this woman named Maurice Grenier who was pregnant at the time. She was part of the cult. She ate 2 more pancakes than Roch had said she was allowed to eat. So he punched her in the side and broke 2 of her ribs.
She was 6 months pregnant?
She was 6 months pregnant. And she ate 2 more pancakes.
And when you're pregnant, I don't know anybody who has or has not been pregnant, like, your ribs are like the first thing to just go. Because the baby just like grows inside you and like stretches your ribs. So your ribs are already sore as hell. So like, god damn.
I mean, just everything about this. She ate 2 more pancakes, dude. Like, come on.
Some people, when they're pregnant, their ribs break from the baby. Like, kicking them.
He broke them for her.
Good god.
Yeah. So I did also read about I only found this one thing, and it said it was one of his favorite punishments at the time, which would be to force someone to strip naked and stand in the snow for a few hours.
Hours? Oh my god.
Naked. in Quebec. It gets cold as fuck there. Like, it gets to, like,
How do you
minus
not
40.
die? Like, at what point do you die?
I don't know, probably longer than a couple hours. Yeah, so none of them died at that point. Nothing, I didn't read anything more than that. That's all I heard. But basically, I did read that, like, nobody would fight back. They all accepted this. So it kind of shows, like, at this point, he was kind of, like, testing the waters. He was like, oh, I could get away with abusing these people. And he was drinking again, so it sounds like he was pretty violent when he was drinking, specifically. Like, he was violent already, but extra, so when he was drinking. But around the end of 1978, Maurice, who's the woman he punched for eating pancakes, she started to talk about leaving the cult. I wonder fucking why.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so she wanted to leave. So Roch instructed Jacques, her husband that was, like, officially her husband before they entered the cult. Yeah. No longer recognized.
Oh, wait. Her husband before she entered the cult, or, like, the match that he
before
made?
She entered the cult.
Oh.
So it wasn't her husband in his eyes, but they had been married before, and they were both members of the cult.
And whose baby was in her? Was it his baby?
You know what? I'm not sure. I believe she had a baby with her ex, not her husband, no longer recognized husband, and with Roch. I'm pretty sure he impregnated... I read that he had impregnated all of the women. I don't know that they all, like, actually gave birth, but he did... Like, some of them already had kids, which it'll come into play. Like, there's more information about some of the kids. So she was pregnant, whatever. So she wanted to leave the cult. And so Roch told her husband, her no longer recognized husband, he told him to cut off one of her toes with an axe as a punishment.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Her husband.
And, like, was he expecting him to be like, okay, cool, yeah, like, do you have an axe?
Well, he didn't want to do it, surprisingly. Jacques didn't want to do it. So Roch began to taunt him, saying, what are you, a faggot? Don't you have... Can I say that? F word? Don't you have any balls? If you want to be a man, you have to learn how to teach your woman a lesson. That's what he fucking said to him.
So, what's her name again?
Maurice.
Had she left? And, like,
no, she wanted to leave. She was thinking about leaving. And Roch found out that she was, like, talking about leaving at the time.
Jesus Christ. So, she would have left to go back to that husband, I'm assuming.
No. Her husband was within the cult. And I think she just wanted to, like, escape overall.
Okay.
So he said, like, listen, like, you gotta do this. So,
oh my God.
So Jacques, her husband, he started to cry because he's like, this is very scary and upsetting, fair. And so Roch grabbed the axe and he threatened that he was actually just going to cut off all of her toes himself. It's like, if you fucking don't do this, I am going to cut off all of her toes. So, reluctantly...
Oh my God, he did it!
He did it. Jacques cut off one of her small toes. Yeah.
Like the pinky?
One of her small toes, it says. So I'm assuming, like, one of the last.
Because, like, how with an axe, like...
just imagine!
My bare toes are out here, everybody who can't see.
Protect them.
How would you, like, just isolate one?
I don't know.
Ooh.
Yeah. And the article also said that after that, Jacques became one of his main enforcers. Like, he would have him carry out.
He was, like, changed ever from...
I guess so.
He was changed
I think
that moment.
Yeah.
Oh...
Yeah. So at this point, he has everyone terrified to leave him because he does shit like this.
Sorry. Aidan scared.
Oh, hey. Sorry. everything scares you when you're reading this stuff. When I was, like, reading it online, I was like, oh God.
Yeah.
Like, every noise, one of my snakes, like, thumped. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
Oh my
like, you
God.
know, when they thump.
Yeah.
I was like, Jesus fucking Christ. It wasn't even this part that I was like, Madison, should I even do this? It was later. Like, this is nothing.
Oh,
He does so much more fucked up shit. Yeah.
I just wouldn't want to part
And
with
it's
any
so
of my
detailed.
toes.
No, I know. They're all important. Look at these toes. They're so important. Yeah, imagine your husband. Like, imagine some guy being like, Chris, cut off one of Madison's toes. Oh. So at this point, everyone's terrified to leave him. And remember how he said that the world is going to end on February 17th, 1979? So that day actually came and went.
Yeah.
The world didn't end, weirdly. I don't know. But he did manage to convince his followers that, like, you know, it's hard to predict days and times when it comes to God. You know, these things are kind of, like, unclear. So the world, it could end at any time. And basically, like, you guys have to stay with me because if you don't, like, you're not going to be part of the righteous. So he was, like, his followers were basically terrified and staying with him under the threat that the end of the world was near. Yeah.
Checks out.
Yeah, I mean... I guess they believed him. Okay, so at this point, the police actually did manage to arrest him for obstruction of justice. He'd been basically like, the police had been trying to get him with something for years, and he'd been repelling them just through, like, his charm. So I guess they did manage to get him on something, or just on the fact that he was, like, avoiding cooperating with them. And he was taken in for psychiatric evaluation at a hospital in Quebec City. So this is kind of interesting, right?
Yeah. Like, what did they find?
Yeah. So there, he managed to completely charm and manipulate the doctors, one of whom actually started referring to him as Moses. Yeah.
Oh my God.
He got all of them on his side at the
Jesus
psychiatric
Christ,
hospital.
When he's oh my
and
God.
doesn't that make you question, like, sorry?
The psychiatric
yeah,
hospital?
like, sorry
Yes.
anybody who's in the psychiatric hospital, but, like, or who works there, but, like, this guy's, like, blatantly not good news, and they think he's awesome.
He's just chopping off people's toes.
Yep. He's chopping off, fucking punching people, pregnant women, scaring them. And so, like, the doctors felt like he was this, like, misunderstood great guy. And actually the media as well at the time started portraying him as this, like, gentle mountain man who was just living an alternative lifestyle. Yeah. So then, because, the police had arrested him and sent him to this psychiatric evaluation. So in the end, he was given a 1-year suspended sentence.
Okay.
Like, nothing, pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
And actually now, like, the followers of the cult began to see him as even more powerful, because if the psychiatric experts couldn't find anything wrong with him, how could they say that he wasn't a prophet of God?
Yeah, exactly. Basically, it just confirmed that he's, like, a nice, normal guy.
Yeah. Pretty much. A gentle mountain man was how he was described in the media at the time. Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
Here's where things get pretty fucked up. And this is still not as fucked up as they get, but there's a big fucking turn about to happen right here. Things are about to get gross and fucked up. Okay. So, a new cult member whose name was... Okay, spelled like Guy. I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Guy, but I think can I say Guy, because I feel like it's easier to say. His name is Guy Veer. Guy Veer. I think I'm gonna say it like Guy because it just makes more sense to me. Shout out, sorry. Okay. You're cool. I'm sure you're cool. So he joined the group. He joined the cult. He had actually been treated for depression at the same psychiatric hospital that Roch was evaluated at. I'm not sure if they met there or not, but he sought out the group and chose to live in the wilderness with them. Roch allowed him to join the cult, but he made him stay in a storage shed separate from the cabin. And he gave him the job of babysitting the other children, which was, like, the few children that Roch hadn't fathered. So it was, like, the kids who...
The rejects.
Yeah, it was, like, the other kids. So he considered Guy, or Guy, a lower-class member of the group since he was mentally unstable. Look who's fucking talking.
That's a healthy scenario.
Yeah, because he was treated with depression. So Roch was like, you, buddy, you've got issues. I'm good, but you... So,
oh my God.
So yeah, so the 3 kids who weren't his own kids were basically, like, Guy's, like, charges to be babysat for. He also had 3 of his own kids at that time. 3 of the women had given birth, or, 3 kids had been given birth to, that were living within the actual commune. So there's different accounts of what went down in this situation with Guy. I'm going to tell you the 2 accounts. Some really fucked up shit goes down. Not good stuff. But there's 2 accounts. The first account I'm going to give you is what the official account is.
Okay.
So apparently one of the kids, Samuel, who's 2 years old, was crying and keeping Guy awake one night. The guy was supposed to be watching them. So Guy screamed in his face, which surprisingly didn't help quiet the child.
Oh, gee.
I mean, you would think that it would help the child feel calmer and sleep, but no. And then he ended up, like, this is what everyone said, he ended up punching the kid in the face 5 or 6 times. Yeah. So here's what the cult members claimed happened, which is later what became the official account accepted by the courts, because this, spoiler alert, ended up going to court.
Oh.
This is what all the cult members said. So allegedly, the next day, his head, baby Samuel's head, was flopping around on his neck.
Oh.
Yeah, and his penis had swelled up. That was, like, the alleged. So Roch, took a pair of scissors.
No.
And after sterilizing them in alcohol,
No.
lanced Samuel's penis to permit the urine to flow out. So his
2-year-old child.
2-year-old child, wannabe medicine man.
Oh no.
After Guy allegedly like punched the shit out of him. Yeah.
Oh my god. And this Guy guy, like, what the hell?
Yeah. He's mentally unstable, this fucker. I mean, they are separating him. They're keeping him in a storage shed. He obviously had mental issues before. Like, it's a fucking recipe for disaster. Why is this kid the one babysitting the kids?
And how old is Guy? Do we know?
I don't know how old he was, but he was probably around the same age as the rest, like 20s, 30s. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Yep.
This poor child.
I know.
Is this child okay? Where is he now?
No. The next morning, he was found dead.
Ah.
Yeah. So that's like, yeah. That's like what. Okay, that's what like. I mean, this is a little bit like the way the story's told. It's going to be a little bit out of order, but that's like that's what everyone said happened. However, there was a film called Savage Messiah that was created about Roch, and in it, Giselle, who's the main wife, has a different story. So she said that in the morning, Samuel's face was a little bit bruised, like maybe Guy like kind of punched him or whatever, but there was nothing really wrong with him. However, Roch decided that the child needed to be circumcised. So,
2-year-old child.
Yeah, he just decided for no reason. So he used the alcohol solution he squeezed it into the kid's mouth to use as an anesthetic, and that may have been enough to cause his death by alcohol poisoning, as well as circumcising him. So that's why the kid apparently died. Yeah. Like, he just decided, like, I'm a medicine guy. Maybe I'll just pour some alcohol down this kid's, like, rubbing alcohol down this kid's throat. So that.
I feel like this whole episode is just going to be me going,
just fucking wait. This is, like, nothing. So, I mean, what happens later is so much more graphic. So, I guess this was Maurice's kid, the one who had wanted to leave. Samuel was his kid.
Missing toe now.
Yeah, missing toe. Her child has been killed. It wasn't Roch's kid. It was her husband Jock's kid. She just went right back to work after hearing about his death. Yep. So then,
baby.
Yeah. And Roch suggested that they should burn the baby's remains because they didn't want the bears to get into them. And Maurice and Jock agreed. Yes, they do. And then another cult member burned the body. And then life went back to normal.
She's air quoting for those listening.
So for the next 6 months... From everything I heard, things went smoothly, more or less. However, one night, Roch, in a drunken rage, decided it was time to punish Guy Vere for the situation with the baby Samuel's death. And he decided, there was like this whole situation of how he decided this. It's like back and forth. But what it ended up was he decided that Guy should be castrated as a punishment.
Ooh.
Yeah, like why not?
Okay, castration. Is it the whole penis or just the balls?
I think it's the balls. It's just the balls.
Aidan, do you know? What castration is? Is it the whole penis or the penis or just the...
I think it's the balls.
Yeah, I think so too. Actually, yes, because that's what they say for dogs. So.
Yeah, true. That's neutering, right?
Yeah, neutering. So
grown man.
Here's a fun fact.
What?
So he actually convinced Guy to sign a letter of consent, agreeing to it.
Of course he did.
Yes.
That's very smart.
Yes.
But very fact.
How did he convince Guy? He told him that if we castrate you, it's going to cure you from the headaches that you constantly suffer from, and it's also going to cure his excessive masturbation.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Well, you're not going to want to go down there.
Yeah. Pretty much. And he also kind of convinced him, saying that, like, being a eunuch would put him a step up from the slave that he currently is. Like, he was like, Guy, you're basically trash. If we do this, you're going to rise up in the ranks a little bit.
Oh, God.
Want to hear how he did it?
Yes. No.
So,
yes, no, but yes.
Yeah.
Kind of.
I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you. It's not that many. This isn't that many details. But so he had Guy lie on the kitchen table as Gabrielle, one of his, like, wives. He got an elastic band, a razor blade, a magnifying glass, a pair of tweezers, and rubbing alcohol. Everything you need to perform an operation. Yeah. So apparently, like, it says that the operation was painless. I don't really know how that happened.
A lie.
That doesn't seem accurate.
That's a bold-faced lie.
Doesn't seem accurate. So apparently, although Guy's scrotum bled for a week, he was okay. And he never complained of another headache, actually. So, you know.
I wouldn't be complaining about anything.
I think it worked.
Oh my God.
Yeah. However, after this whole situation, Roch was concerned that he was a security risk and that he might, like, you know, rat them out and fuck them over because he had castrated him. But he also enjoyed tormenting him. He enjoyed beating him, and he would tell his followers, stab him so he bleeds to death, but he would call them off at the last minute just to spare him.
So they were stabbing him?
No, I think he would just, it wasn't
he would
fully
tell
clear,
them
but he
to
would
do
be
it?
like, guys, you're going to make him bleed to death. Start stabbing him. And then he'd be like, just kidding, saved you. Like, it's like something that God did with Abraham. Like, he said he was going to kill him, but then he didn't. And then it was like this. Yeah. You can fact check me on that, anyone. But you know what I mean? Like, it was a God thing.
Yeah. Okay. Very God complex.
Yeah. Okay.
All these cult leaders are like that.
Yeah. Okay, page turn. Almost done this part. Okay, so he did actually escape. He went to a neighboring village, and there he told people that a baby had died after being kicked by a horse. That was his story. I mean, mentally unstable, so that's what he told them. However, at this point, the police descended on the cabin with helicopters, like the whole thing.
Oh yeah, if a baby died.
Yep. They finally had a reason. So they arrested Roch and Samuel's parents, the boy who had died, Maurice and Jacques. They arrested them, and they moved the 7 kids in the compound at the time to foster homes. The police found Samuel's remains. They found Guy's letter of consent to be castrated, and the coroner found the group criminally responsible for Samuel's death.
Mm-hmm. Duh.
Yeah. So Roch and several other of the cult members were charged with criminal negligence causing bodily harm to Samuel.
Not like straight up murder?
No,
Oh my
just criminal
God.
negligence
I guess
causing bodily harm.
Mm-hmm.
And,
like that.
Yeah. And there was others. I didn't detail all the names in this. Like, some more of the names come into play later, but not all of them do. So I didn't detail all their names. But some of the others, they were charged with neglect towards their children. So, yeah, I mean, that's fair. The tip of the iceberg, fucking police. But yeah.
Oh my God.
They all pled not guilty.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not guilty at all. And there was a 9-month trial, at the end of which all parties were found guilty of all charges.
Good.
Yeah. So Guy Vere was sentenced, but then later he was actually acquitted for mental incompetence, and he was sent back to the psychiatric hospital.
Oh, that great psychiatric hospital that
Yeah.
does their job so well.
Yeah, that could so accurately judge Roch's psychological health. Yeah, so he was sent back there. Some of the others, they were sentenced to like 6 months or so in prison, and some of them 3 years probation, so they got some time. And Roch himself was sentenced to 2 years in prison and 3 years probation, which was served concurrently.
For the death of a 2-year-old child.
Yeah.
God damn.
I know. 2 years, criminal negligence causing bodily harm.
Wow.
Yeah. At the time, he was jailed in the Orainsville Detention Center in Quebec City. So at this point, all the cult members had moved to Quebec City. They were all sharing 4 apartments collectively because they wanted to be near Roch while he was in jail.
Like, get away!
I know. It's like, this is your chance.
Ah.
Get out before you lose your toes or worse.
Or children!
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, literally. So, yeah. So that happened. And then he's in jail. And while they were in jail, or Roch was in jail, a couple others were in jail. He was in jail longer. The police at the time, like, bulldozed the cabin and were like, this place is done, basically. So they, like, broke it down. Okay, so that's where I want to end it for now. End of part 1. Roch is in jail for 2 years. This is like 1982. He will later get out of jail in 1984. And spoiler alert, he does continue with his cult and his fucked up actions. So there's a lot more to the story. It honestly gets way more gruesome. Like, this is legitimately the tip of the iceberg. Like, anyway, so that's part 1. Okay, so tell me, where do you rank it? What are your thoughts?
Well, a lot of it's based on the fact that I know it's gonna get worse.
Yeah, because I keep telling you.
When, like, the baby's dead.
Yeah.
Like, I'm already putting this, like, because I'm trying to put it in context as the whole thing, and not as, like, just this
but
one
just
part.
to do it as this part.
At this part, I'm at, like, a 7.
Okay.
Like, it's a baby died.
Yeah,
from
that's
being
fucked.
smacked
It's
and
fucked.
chopping his penis. Like, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
And
Like,
I
kind of
know
for no
it's
reason.
gonna get worse.
Way worse. Like, way
Ooh,
fucking worse.
I don't like that at all.
Yeah. Like, when I was researching this, and I'm telling you, like, this is fucked, but it gets worse later, or there's just more details described later. Actually, it does get worse later, what am I saying? But I was literally reading it, and at some points being like, should I Like, is this okay? Like, should I even talk about this? Is the true crime podcast even like, is this even like within the realm of what's okay to talk about?
No, I think
it is.
Somebody's gonna want to watch it.
Yeah,
I'm sure some people are probably gonna check out, and that's fine too. And you know, this is it. To me, it's always like, if it really happened, like I want to know.
Yeah.
And it's up to everybody to check out when they feel they need to check out. It's been very, very few occasions in which I've done that.
Yeah. Oh, I've never heard you say that you have in any occasion.
Yeah. Until I had kids, it never happened.
Right.
Literally never happened. There was one recently, I was listening to a podcast about the guy in the German cannibal.
Yeah,
guy.
who found someone on the internet.
Yeah, and then they're like eating his penis together. Like,
yeah.
And for whatever reason, like halfway through, I was like, maybe I don't need to listen to this right now.
Yeah.
I don't know. And so I like only listened to half of it. Other than that, I can't even, probably, less than I could count. Listen on one hand.
Yeah. Like, to me, sometimes I'm in different moods. There's times where I feel like I'm just more desensitized.
Yeah.
And one day that I was reading about this, because it was like several days that I went back, or like, I mean, I'd read about this case a couple of years ago, probably. I think it was like 2017. I remember reading about it and just like going down the rabbit hole, as you do, and reading every detail. But then when I was actually researching it, one of the days I was just at a point where I was just like, I don't even want this in my brain. Like, yeah. I was like, I don't even want to be aware that this stuff happened.
Yeah, like, to me, it's mostly the stuff that happens to children, especially in like a torturous manner.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just really don't like it. But I don't know. Like, to me, it's about the like extremes of the human mind. Like,
yes.
where like the fact that this can happen, that like somebody would do this. Like, I just want to know. I want to know what happened and why.
Yeah, me too. And you know what's so interesting is like, it's the isolation component that really gets them, because if any of these people had close ties to someone outside the cult and felt,
sure.
You know what I mean? And it's like, not only are they psychologically isolated, they're physically isolated. So it's like, that's what allows him
trapped.
That's what really allows him to exert this control over them, because they genuinely don't feel like they like have any other choice, and because they're not being exposed to society, this becomes their new normal. Well, like, they start to believe that's normal,
and in order to like survive it, you have to buy into it.
Right you have to kind of like be in denial, essentially.
Yeah, you have to be like, this is okay,
he's God, okay. Man, he talks to God.
Yeah, otherwise like you have to be like, well, the alternative is hell, and that's gonna suck worse than getting my toes chopped off. God.
Yeah, so that's part one. I thought it was a good point to end it, because this is kind of like, later actually is when he moves to Ontario, when he comes out of jail. So we'll talk about that next time. Right in our own backyard.
Fun.
Yeah, so that's that. Part one of Roch Theriault.
Please go check out our Instagram at Who's Knocking Podcast. See what we've posted there. Comment. Let us know what you thought. If you checked out. If it was too much for you. Check back for part 2, which will be the next episode. If you so wish, send us an email at hello@whosknockingpodcast.com. Send us suggestions, feedback. Give us a rating if you so choose.
Yeah, rate us on iTunes.
Preferably a good one.
Yeah.
But if you have criticism, we'll take it.
Yeah, we'll take it, I guess. I mean, it can't be worse than having your toe chopped off. So
I'd rather criticism than having my toe chopped off.
Yeah, me too. And let us know, because we'll post specific things about this episode. So let us know. Like, I want to hear part 1, people's opinions. I don't know why in my head I split it up, part 1 and part 2. I guess just because 2 episodes. Yeah, so I had separate rankings. I can't believe I said this was a 5. It's worse, right? I don't know.
See, it's hard to say, because I know that it's going to get worse. So, like, I'm not going to be like, oh, it's a 5. Like, no, like it's just
yeah.
I think after part 2 will be like the real rating.
Oh, just you wait.
Oh my God.
It's coming.
All right. Well,
stay tuned.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
This podcast is produced in collaboration with Lost Line Media. Artwork by August Digital. Music by Matthew Cook.